One of the first things you learn in therapy, if you do go to therapy, is like your inner child still lives inside.
Oh, yeah.
It sounded like such a weird, like campy, strange thing to do, to like talk to it and like, nurture it. But I found myself being so emotional doing that. Like I've had sessions where like I've talked to myself as a kid and I didn't know why I would get so emotional about it. But you realize like how much there is that innocent kid in there that just wants to be loved and nurtured and is so scared,
I just was like, what if I decided to do with my life? Talk about your inner child. I reached out to my 9-year-old inner child and was like, you were really off the mark, lady. Like, why did you want to be an actress? This was a stupid idea. And she's like,
you should have been an archaeologist like you thought.
Yes, I wanted to be an archaeologist before that. You should have been an archaeologist, damn it. My 9-year-old self was like, you'll catch up. Oh, stupid girl. My 9-year-old self was way wiser than me. But so
our inner child's always super wise, very simple, very clear, but usually very wise.
Extremely wise. I defer to her at all times, at all costs. Like It's just like, where are you? Please help. But so
does your inner child have a name? Have you given your inner child a name?
Little Anna. I call her little Anna because I'm AnnaLynne.
And I have this photo. I don't know if this is a practice that one of your therapists ever did with you. I have this photo. I have this photo on my phone. Can you guess what this photo is? That I've had since January.
I don't know, maybe your inner child. It's you as a kid.
It's me as a kid.
I definitely did some of that when I was fighting anorexia, something I went through in my late teens, early 20s. And that was, I think, one of the really helpful techniques was just talking to the inner child. It's so much easier to love yourself when you think of yourself as a little girl whose body I'm hurting, and looking at her and being like, she was perfect, there was nothing wrong with her. And it kind of helps you humanize yourself.
The degree to which you have learned in yourself, just by virtue of maybe being in an environment as a child, that like, okay, I don't want to do anything to rock the boat. I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want to be a bad girl. These are all very common narratives for children that nonetheless manifest in adults, where it becomes a mechanism for self-preservation. So your self-reflection, which we could say is beautiful, and it really is, really speaks to me in a way that it shows that you perhaps have become a little bit too responsible in the way that you think you're accountable for other people's wellness or their happiness. Or
100% accurate.
Can you share, how does that leave you feeling?
I'm abandoning really the inner child.
But I'm wondering what that dialogue's been like with your inner child and if it's changed.
I was like super not in touch with it like for a long time. Again, it was like I just kind of got through things by like suppressing and just being like, oh, that's not attached to this, or that's fine. Like, I just kind of always like pushed it down. And so I feel like there was no dialogue at all. Like I just like pushed her down completely. And yeah, it was just never something that like I just always thought, like you grow up and life changes and that's it. And you don't realize how much you are affected by things when you're younger and how much that innocence is still in you. Like ultimately, yeah, we're grown up and we have, new views and, new experiences, but ultimately like all we are is just like children and innocent people just that want to be loved and want companionship and want to be understood. And so I think that dialogue has changed completely with not only the way I speak to my inner child per se, but just the way I speak to myself now.
Yes. It's the same thing. I mean, it's essentially the same thing.
100%. Yeah. It's just a part of you. It's just that innocent part of you that's just trying to navigate life, that, is just trying to understand.
My inner child, when I met her and she was running from me, one of the things that began to build the trust was I went back into all the memories that I had, the memories that weren't fragmented, the ones that I actually had that were not so wonderful. And I had plenty of not so wonderful memories on that I did remember. I closed my eyes and I imagined myself. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a few more AnnaLynnes. I decided to bring an army of AnnaLynnes, 32 AnnaLynnes geared up. And we stormed into those memories, and I got my little self out of those memories. I picked her up, told anyone who was hurting her, you want to fucking come at us? Because we'll rip your face off. And I came out with this mama bear protective love energy. And that was how it began. And I started to gain her trust.
This is a photo I've had since January. And my therapist was like listening. And I said, why do I keep choosing specific types of relationships.
Right.
Not that these people are bad and wrong. Not that,
right.
Nothing, just not the right match for me.
Right.
And there was, I kept doing it because I kept abandoning myself. I kept abandoning myself on my values and my vision to create peace and make someone else happy. As opposed to being peace and healing that I am not enough inner child wounds, to creating boundaries and then creating from a place of standards and agreements, not I'm constantly having my agreements broken by a partner and giving in to try to make them happy to create peace.
And so even if you were to look at it third person, if you were to abandon someone that you loved, if you abandon a daughter, a child, how would that feel for you?
I'm just being honest. Like, I wouldn't do that.
You said it perfectly. I've abandoned myself in the process of trying to protect myself. It looks like I'm being more considerate of the other person, which is actually about self-preservation, going back to the child that didn't want to get in trouble, didn't want to upset mom, whatever it is. And so actually you're abandoning your own self in the process of self-survival. Now, once you see that, there's got to be some feeling of something.
I got a dog in the pandemic, as a lot of us did. I was, got a COVID puppy, and it wasn't it kind of clicked for me when I would look at her. Even now I look at her and I'm like, look at this little being, this poor little thing just relies on me for, for simple things like food, water, love, to be nurtured. If I neglected this little dog, she would not survive in the world. She relies on me so heavily. I would never do anything to harm this little being. But then I was looking at how I treat myself, and I'm like, some days I don't eat because I'd be so depressed. I'd be too depressed to eat. I wouldn't feed myself. I wouldn't sleep. I wouldn't I'd talk to myself horribly. I would do everything that I would never do to this little being that I love so much. And I'm like, why do I do it to myself then? Why do I deserve the things that someone else would never deserve, And that's when it really clicked. I'm like, why am I not treating myself with the same care, with the same level of love and patience and care? And honestly, that's when it clicked. I have to start treating myself as if I were treating my dog or a baby, or someone that I love. Because we always tend to get the brunt of our own judgment, and oftentimes the way that we speak to ourselves is never how we would speak to someone we love, So that's honestly when it clicked, is when I started caring for someone else, for this little thing, this little tiny bundle of love,
I was intent on my inner child trusting me and not running from me anymore in my mind. And I didn't care how I got there. So I created this army inside my mind, and I would go in and I would imagine the bad memory. I would walk up the street. I would literally see myself in my army of AnnaLynne strutting down the street, turn down the driveway, fling open the door. I'm like, hey, motherfuckers, we're about to throw down right now. And I would and it was amazing because my mind would play with me. And I had one moment where my little self, I had gotten good at this. So now I was like, oh, now I know what to do. Just come in, beat some face, get my little self out, and we're good, And then I had one memory where I couldn't get little me out. And that's when I realized that my mind was actually playing back with me, but I was not in control of it. And this was both enlightening and terrifying. So what I did was exactly what I'd done with all these other memories, and I always was able to pick her up and we leave the memory. And then in my mind, I felt like that I had taken that moment and healed it because I got her out and I made her safe. I became the woman that my little me needed, and I showed up for her. And in time and space in my brain, I was able to make those moments happen and heal those spots. Well, then I had this memory, and I go to pick up my little self just like normal. And I'm like, okay, out of here, let's fly, girl. And she drops like lead to the ground. And I see the person who's coming to sexually abuse her, and it's not the one who was normally perpetrating onto her, it was someone else. And I'm seeing him getting closer, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna kick this guy's ass. No, you have we gotta get out of here. I started getting frantic in my own mind at a situation that was just in my own mind, but it felt so real, and I didn't know why I couldn't get her out. And all of a sudden I said, I need to trust my mind. Our bodies want to heal themselves, right? I always use the example of, you get a cut on your arm. You don't have to be like, coagulate blood, scab over, new skin grow, the body's like, lady, I got this. The mind is the same way. Just create a safe, clean environment, a safe, clean space for the wound to heal. Same in the mind.
Yeah.
When I opened up and said, please help me get her out of here, I was able to find a way to utilize the people in my spouse. I started bringing in other people, other sources. I brought in a child version of one of the perpetrators who I loved, who was someone in the community. And before he was abused, I my mind went back and got him at 8 years old. I don't know. I wouldn't know to think to do this. My mind did this by itself. And it was literally like I was watching a movie now in my own mind, and it's like shit's going down. And I'm like, I'm not in control. But this little boy version of this person who grows up to be someone that I loved, who then when I'm 31, remembered that he harmed me. He opens the door to this shed. He dives in and runs. He starts crying, dives to the ground and picks up little me. We're about the same age, about the same size at that point. He's like, somebody help her. Somebody please help her. She needs help. She's hurting. I literally came out of the EMDR session with my doctor and I started bawling my eyes out, and I was like, I started learning compassion. I started learning all of these tools, all of these techniques. We talked about alchemy at the beginning of the conversation. This was how I learned to alchemize my trauma, because that was the same boy who would grow up and harm me later. But in this memory, he was good.
I would say, well, we've created this incredible dynamic and connection and had these fun times. So I'm just going to do whatever it takes to make you happy, to make this work.
Yeah.
And that was my lesson, to learn how to walk away when something wasn't in alignment with my higher self.
Right.
And so this has been a profound year of continued healing of my little Lewis, who I abandoned for 30 plus years to create peace, to try to make someone happy with who I was and change myself to please them, the way I watched my mom do that with my dad.
I cried so much for my inner child. Like, I would literally hug myself.
I did the same. I did this. But did you hug I did an exercise one time. I did an exercise one time that made me weep like a child, where I was I first did Wim Hof and started breathing and just channeling it and moving the energy throughout my body. And then I was meditating afterwards, and I did an exercise where I was laying down, and I would see my 5-year-old self that was sexually abused, and I was holding my 5-year-old self. And then I had a moment where I was having a conversation with my 5-year-old self, saying, I got you, we're here now. And then I immersed, I put him into me, and was hugging myself just like that. It was crazy experiences.
Oh man.
I feel like I believe in all of the above that you mentioned. I believe in the inner child, trusting that truest form of yourself, because I think that's the closest you'll ever get to your spirit. Your own spirit is that sweet inner child. So I believe in all of it.
Yeah.
When you really wake up and go, wow, I have truly, because without going through every item of your romantic relationships and where there was hostility or there was hardship or there was, derogatory at your expense, there was abuse of some form, and abuse is a big word, but it could be the way someone spoke to you. That's the abandonment of yourself.
This is the process of healing, to be able to feel for the abandoned inner self.
Yes.
The inner child.
Yeah.
If being that way, and I said I feel like that'd be abandoning.
Yeah.
What would it feel like to abandon someone? You're asking that. If I could understand that feeling, if I could start to access that feeling, I would now create the relationship with the inner child, because that's exactly what I've done to it.
Yes. And it gets a little deeper because you're also the inner child. So there's not only the experience of a woman who is denying her own needs, her own worth, the way that people treat her, which is the abandonment of self, but there's the experience of that which is abandoned within you. When you recognize that you have feelings, right? And I'm not talking in a woo-woo kind of kumbaya, but you're a sentient being, you're a woman. you know, and an extraordinary woman and an accomplished woman and a caring woman. And the degree to which all of that gets kind of pushed to one side because you can handle the abuse, as I tell people, just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's healthy.
Right.
And
Totally.
So can you just, even if it's a word or two, if you recognize the degree to which you've discarded some of your own, like, care of self, what would that leave you feeling?
It would be like I've disassociated with myself, and so it feels, that's why it's so hurtful, because that's exactly what I do to myself.
Whatever your best is, be kind to yourself. I learned kindness to my inner child. I learned compassion. I learned kindness and compassion. And if we looked around at 7.8 billion people in the world, and instead we saw 7.8 billion inner children in the world, we would be a lot kinder.
But you've learned to protect yourself and be okay with it, even though you're not actually okay with it energetically and physiologically. It will manifest in different ways over time. You know, you're still young and healthy, but over time, that's what becomes dis-ease, you know, manifests physiologically because of the absence of ease in our system, because we're actually hurt. And hurts, bedfellow, is also fear, scared.
Yeah.
So that little girl who's protected herself by virtue of becoming tough and resilient is actually hurt and scared.
Oh no, I'm gonna cry on you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But it was like, I was like, wow, this is the wound. Like, I've had to have my own back my whole life.